right, you may take your seats. So usually before conferences begin or summits begin, it's important to understand something that's called an expectation setting. An expectation setting allows the speakers that are present, moderators that are present, to be able to just have an understanding of what are the keywords that the audience is trying to look for, what do you expect out of it, what is important. So in no particular order, I would just like, you can chant or shout any words that you feel are very important for you to hear from the speakers. The first one for me is investment opportunities. Somebody else? Money. I like that. Somebody else? Affordability. Another person? Randomly, guys. Yes, sir. Saving. Saving. Another person? Financing. Money is very important. There's a panel that is about investment opportunities, so be sure to join that track. Another person? Feel free to shout as I get my tablet ready. Words that you would really like to hear in this particular conversation. Say that again. Scaling. We have German Corporation in the building. We also have GIZ, who are very big in sponsoring students in reference to skills. We also have Chogori, whereby the networking session will be powered by them today. We also have FSD Africa, UK International Development, Rentworks, Kuhnagel, and definitely not forgetting WISEM. Feel free to tag these people when they're coming in front to speak. Different representatives will be able to be present, so feel free to be with us online. Without further ado, I will start with our first guest, who will be in today's forum. The gentleman that I will introduce next is currently the leading expert in sustainable mobility from GIZ. He has been quite instrumental in advancing e-mobility initiatives across Africa, more efficient transport solutions. His deep commitment in sustainable development and his wealth of experience has been able to make him key in voiceivity in reference to the green mobility space. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Michael Schuster.
Sante. Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm actually here to introduce the head of the German Corporation of the Federal Republic Germany in Nairobi, Mr. Daniel Günther, who would do the opening remarks from our end. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Daniel Günther. I'm head of cooperation at the German Embassy here in Nairobi. My role is to oversee German cooperation with the Kenyan government, which is implemented through our German government-owned agencies, GIZ and KfW. So thank you for Michael, who's leading the GIZ transport team, for the introduction. Engineer Michael Muchin, dear colleagues from the Kenyan ministries present, distinguished guests, esteemed partners, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. The future of e-mobility will be electric, which is actually already the first mistake I did in the first sentence. Of course, the future of e-mobility is going to be electric, but what I want to say is the future of mobility will be electric. According to IEA Global EV Outlook 2024, electric car markets are already seeing exponential growth as sales neared 14 million in 2023. Electric cars accounted for around 18% of all cars sold in 2023, up from 14% in 2022 and only 2% 5 years earlier. These trends indicate that growth remains robust while electric car markets mature. Europe, where I'm from, is playing a major role here, being the second largest market worldwide, with new registration nearly 3.2 million in 2023, increasing by almost 20% relative to 2020. But electric vehicles are not just a topic for industrialized countries. There are also promising signs for emerging electric vehicle markets, albeit from a smaller base. This is especially true, and those of you that live in Nairobi like me can see that every day. This is especially true for 2- and 3-wheelers. In emerging markets and developing economies, they already outnumber electric cars. For example, over half of India's 3-wheeler registrations in 2023 were electric, demonstrating their growing popularity. So, why is it that electric mobility is important for us? From Germany's point of view, electric mobility is the key to climate-friendly mobility all around the world, particularly when operated using renewable-based electricity. Electric vehicles generate much less CO2 than combustion engines. Also, electric vehicles can store energy and will be able to offset fluctuations in wind and solar power, thus fostering the expansion and market integration of these volatile energies. However, I have to add, we all know the traffic situation in Nairobi. It feels like it's getting worse from year to year. I think we shouldn't look at e-mobility alone. E-mobility needs to be put in a holistic picture. So when you look at the transport sector, you need to follow the ASI dogma, which is first you got to avoid unnecessary travel. Then the travel that's still necessary, you have to shift, for example, to public transport. And then the trips you can't avoid and you can't shift, those you have to improve, meaning switching from combustion engines to electric mobility. So I just want to make sure that we understand each other. We don't think e-mobility is panacea. It needs to be a part in a bigger transport mobility strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, transitioning to electric mobility is key to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the transport sector, if you take a look at it in a holistic way, like just explained. Even more in the case, and that's where you get to what's important to you, even more in the case of Kenya, where the share of renewable energy in the electricity generation mix accounts for already over 90%, and the goal of the Kenyan government is to raise that level to 100% by 2023. For 45% of all harmful emissions in Nairobi. For those of you that sometimes the reason I'm talking here is we've been a long-term partner for Kenya only in the areas of sustainable economic development and the fight against the adverse impacts of climate change. Green Deal and our bilateral climate and development partnership, which His Excellency President Ruto and Chancellor Scholz signed during the COP27. However, I also have to mention my British colleagues that are in the room today. We also, of course, cooperate not only with our Team Europe partners, but also with our British colleagues. Through our climate and development partnership, Germany is, for example, supporting the continued expansion of renewables in Kenya Union. Also, we are developing training content to enhance existing curricula in the field of automotive and electrical engineering, and are partnering with vocational institutions and other players to ensure Kenya has a critical mass of expertise to offer services for the operation and maintenance of electric vehicles. And last but not least, we are directly supporting small and medium-sized companies that are working on improving and enhancing access for the citizens of Kenya to electric mobility products and services. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know we're already a bit behind the schedule, so I'm going to just stop here and just reiterate our willingness to support the Kenyan government, but also the Kenyan people in their transition to a green, zero-emission economy where the transport sector will play a critical role. I'm happy that you're here today at this very important conference, and I wish you all the best of luck over the next few hours and days on bringing this discussion around e-mobility forward and finding solutions for the challenges that Kenya is facing in the sector. I'm coming from Germany, as mentioned. We are also not where we wanted to be in terms of electric mobility. I think this is a sector where a lot of countries all over the world are currently trying to figure out how to electrify the transport sector in their own countries. So this is a sector where we want to support Kenya to take the next step. But I think it's also important for us to learn what Kenya is doing, what's working, and then maybe we can also implement some of those things in Germany. This is why I'm also very happy to have a lot of colleagues from Germany here today. So wishing you all the best for the next few days, and thanks for having me. Asanteni sana.
Right, thank you very much. Give him a round of applause. Thank you. Next, government involvement is very important in creating policies and the next step. And I had somebody saying they would like to know the policies. And the next person that I will be introducing is from government because voices need to be heard. And when you have such bodies in the room, you are able to appreciate the importance of the role that they play. The next gentleman that I'm going to introduce has a vast and wealth of experience. He's currently the head of Secretariat National Electric Mobility Task Force, championing the e-mobility ministry, and has been steering the transition of advocating for e-movement on climate change matters. He's currently in the public sector, works at the Ministry of Roads and Transport, has also been involved at Kenya Railways Corporation, Kenya Airports Authority, Kenya Civil Authority Association, and not forgetting Kenyatta National Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly help me welcome Engineer Michael Muchiri. Welcome, sir. So sorry.
Gentlemen, thank you, Nyawera. My name is Michael Muchiri from the Ministry of Roads and Transport. And as Nyawera has said, recently we were instrumental in coming up with a draft electric mobility policy. So allow me to start by thanking those who participated in the electric mobility draft policy preparation, you as the stakeholders who gave us your feedback, and institutions such as the World Bank Group, represented by the IFC. They gave us some support. GIZ, we wish to thank Mr. Daniel Gunther, representing the German government, and the gentleman who came earlier on, Michael Schuster, who are with us step by step as we develop the policy. So allow me to involve you in the discussion, and allow me to speak to the topics that we shall be discussing just after this session and for the next 2 days. Some of these discussions, of course, were in the youth forum that was there yesterday, where some of you did manage to come. I have a couple of points, maybe about 5 or 6 points. Point number one, the need for political goodwill. And I'm saying this speaking to us as Africa, e-mobility. Political goodwill is very, very, very instrumental. In the Kenyan context, what comes to mind when I say political goodwill is during last year's Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week. You all remember His Excellency the President driving a very small car, electric car. I think it was yellow or orange or golden, depending on your eyesight. And he drove it for round about 5-6 kilometers. And that spoke to the Kenyan nation that electric mobility is here with us. That is the first, something that is easily noticeable when a country wants to adopt electric mobility. My second example is Ethiopia. Ethiopia is our country to the north. The Ethiopian government, to demonstrate goodwill towards e-mobility, banned certain categories of fossil fuel vehicles. Some people did not believe it, including the diplomatic team. The people in the diplomatic space actually continued importing vehicles like before. the government had to issue a second clarification for the avoidance of doubt that these categories of fossil fuel vehicles are no longer welcome in Ethiopia. If you're importing any vehicle of this category, and Kenya has demonstrated that, and we would wish to share the same experience to the rest of Africa. The second point, which is in our WhatsApp group, some people have been saying about how certain countries in Europe have been closing their e-mobility factories. What is that a pointer to? When a factory has been producing electric vehicles, suddenly it closes or it scales down. Should we get worried as we enter this space? And my answer is no. And we have demonstrated before in Africa on the question of mobile phones. When mobile phone technology, there was a leap. Here in Kenya, mobile phones came towards the end of 1998, 19,000, early 2000s. But there was a leap somewhere along the way where African countries adopted mobile phones faster than the developed countries. Certain countries like in Nigeria were very instrumental in the development of a particular phone. I think it's called Tecno. And Tecno is now available in the bulk of developing countries as a very cheaper option or very practical option. So the same way we demonstrated with mobile phones, and not just the gadget itself, even the applications. Like locally here we demonstrated with a payment platform called M-Pesa. The same trajectory will happen to the countries are scaling down or closing their e-mobility space. Developing countries in Africa should not be worried because we have that electric mobility. This is its time. This technology is unstoppable. My third point, 15 years ago, we had an issue with lead-acid batteries. And we even, lead-acid batteries, because the disposal was so bad, the attempted reuse was so poisonous, communities went to a class action. Here in Kenya, lead-acid batteries. But what happened through the stricter laws came into the space against disposal of lead-acid batteries. And not just the disposal of lead, including how they mine it. And what happened? Few years later, 2-3 years later, there was a sudden shortage of lead and lead-acid batteries. So used and damaged lead-acid batteries became like hotcake, if I may use that word. And suddenly, disposal of lead-acid batteries problem disappeared. Today, in Kenya, if you have a lead-acid battery, there is a scrap metal dealer somewhere looking for it to take care of it as an issue. The same issue will come to lithium-ion batteries. You can see the discussion in the space about the metals that we are using for electronics, whether it's cobalt, nickel, lithium, and their sources from countries such as DRC Congo and other places. Yes, the concern is there. Yes, let us do the standards in readiness for that outfall of disposable, lithium ion and other electric batteries. But let's also be aware that there is that potential for the market to pick up the damaged lithium ion batteries. And as you are aware, here in Kenya, we've already started reusing the batteries whose strength goes below 80%. Below 80% means however long you put that battery on the charger, it doesn't go to 100% generally. So we are reusing them, we are repackaging them for use such as domestic use and also in agriculture. Point number 4, the question of training. An electric vehicle is more expensive than a fossil fuel vehicle. Do you want to give it to any mechanic? Do you want to give it to any person who comes out with a screwdriver and a pair of pliers? We are saying no, it's too expensive to be handled by anybody. Let's take everybody for training. In Kenya, in particular, at the very low level, we call it Jua Kali sector. These are people who are informally trained as apprentices, and they work with motor vehicles. But we are saying we create short courses, and at a higher level, we create diploma courses. We certificate them. And we also need to recognize prior learning. Prior learning in the sense that the mechanical part of the electric vehicle is largely about the same, with only slight adjustment on its weight and some greener materials in it. So prior learning, if you have already learned about the ordinary fossil fuel vehicles, you will get like credits, and then you transition to electric vehicles. The other reason training is important is because the electric battery, even for a small four-wheel vehicle, it can be lethal. So you need training on how to de-energize it before you work on it. Hence, for safety reasons, training. Fifth point, I had alluded to the cost of an electric vehicle. An electric bicycle in Kenya is 10 times more expensive than a non-electric bicycle. A Black Mamba with 8,000 Kenya shillings. But an electric bicycle is 80,000, 10 times more. Government to reduce the cost of the electric bicycle from 80,000 much lower. The electric vehicles generally are 2.5 times more expensive. So what incentives are we giving? What are we doing in the fiscal space so that the electric vehicles are affordable? And that is the discussion we are having. The electric mobility policy has already pointed areas, including how to work with SMEs, that is the small and medium enterprises, it has pointed to green climate funding, which can come in bulk to a bank that is structured to loan to e-mobility. And I think there are one or two e-mobility financiers outside here in the exhibition space and outside in the dining area. If you discuss with them, that is an area we need a lot of capital to reduce the cost from 2.5 times of a fossil fuel vehicle to as close as possible so that they are at par. So that a user will be deciding this over this without much of discussions around the cost, but more of discussions on greening the transportation. Point number 6, standards. Kenya, initially we had 21 standards. Recently we added another 14. So right now we have 35 standards or so. The bulk of them are around safety. But in Kenya we have been saying standards should not run too fast, because when standards run faster than innovation, standards tend to kill the innovation space. So we are working together with the Kenya Bureau of Standards to do on-time standards. And the next item we will be discussing in the next couple of months or next year is the interoperability of the charging infrastructure. So, there is CHAdeMO, there is US type, there is Japan, there is Tesla. But in this market, East Africa and probably Africa, CCS2 is probably the charger we shall adapt, probably. And maybe the e-mobility associations will guide us, and so that when we decide this is the charging standard, both new and used vehicles coming into our country must adopt that standard. And so we don't have to spend extra money on costs of adapters. I had earlier on spoken about the e-mobility policy that we developed recently. We intend to have this document as a live document. And so we need constant input from industry to make the document live and relevant. Jobs for the youth. is a big issue. So what we are looking at is from importing fully built vehicles, then knocked down kits, then completely knocked down kits, then parts, then local manufacture. We want to increase the labor component on the electric vehicle, and in the local manufacture of the electric vehicle to grow our local GDPs, not just in Kenya, but in Africa. And one of the, I'm about to finish, industry capacity. Our local capacity to assemble an electric bus is around about 1 bus per week, which means in 1 year, we can only assemble 50 buses. Yet we want to assemble these buses for the Kenyan market and also East Africa. So what we are saying is, those who have capital to invest in the manufacturing space, we need to build the assembly lines, the manufacturing space, to be able to do more than 1 bus, 500 buses over the next year, the local demand. So there's a lot of space in manufacturing, but what we are lacking, allow me to say that the electric vehicle, the electric vehicle collects a lot of data. So we need a mechanism of how many passengers per day, how many kilometers per day, how much kilowatts consumed, how long the charging took, the CCTV cameras, the fare collection system, all these data. We need a repository for it. We need a place where all this data is stored so that going forward, e-mobility have an easy access to information and data. And even those who are developing the digital space have an easier way of building that digital space because of ease of availability of data. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Apologies that I took a little bit longer than Nyawera would have loved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer. Give him a round of applause. Your information is important, so don't worry, I would have added you some few minutes. Thank you very much. As mentioned earlier, government stakeholder is really important, and we do not take your support and your presence, Engineer, for granted. So thank you very much for being here. My next guest, as well, from the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum, has been a key leader in advancing Kenya's renewable energy initiatives, has a 10-plus year experience in this particular field, plays an instrumental role in shaping policies that drive sustainability and clean energy solutions. His aim and what he sees in the future is that we go green in our day-to-day lives. His dedication in promoting renewable energy is quite important in the country's efforts towards achieving a greener and more sustainable environment. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Stephen Nzioka. Anna. Yes, you're most welcome.
As you have heard, my name is Stephen Nzioka, and I'm an engineer working with the Ministry of Energy as one of the directors of renewable energy, and I'm here to represent the CS, our new CS for energy, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi. I just want to recognize members who are here from the government, development partners, investors who have invested in e-mobility, and all participants who have been invited as guests. And then also, I want to thank Chongori, is it Chongori? FSD and Africa and GIZ for organizing this event, Ministry of Energy. The public-private partnerships foster collaborations between government agencies, private sector entities, and international partners to support the growth of the EV manufacturing and infrastructure ecosystem. These partnerships in e-mobility are especially effective when the public sector incentives are combined with private sector innovation and technology. public-private risks by providing low-interest loans or grants, while the private sector and sustainability of e-mobility projects. We notice that infrastructure is a challenge in adoption of e-mobility. This is because there is inadequate charging infrastructure and the capital cost of structure due to the subsidies and provide high accessibility for a variety of EVs. There are numerous business opportunities for oil marketing of companies in e-mobility. We are not leaving out the companies that are dealing with oil marketing. Why? We are saying partnership between existing petrol stations and EV chargers will lead to smooth transition from, as part of supporting Kenya in the process of transitioning into e-mobility without fully relying on external funding, some banks have developed strategies to finance investors through affordable plans. For example, the NCBA Bank in Kenya has provisioned a Kenya shillings 2 billion fund that can be used to finance up to 80% of the cost of the electric vehicles. So what is the government doing as a ministry? There are initiatives in e-mobility infrastructure which provides opportunities for the investors. And I want to enlist those the initiatives. One is developing bus charging infrastructure through budgetary allocations. So we are thinking of allocating budget for developing bus charging infrastructure by allocating budget through the government. We also intend to simplify requirements for public charging station establishments, the requirements that are required. So instead of having complex requirements, we want to simplify those requirements so that we can have public charging stations being established. The government is also focused on assessing the peak electricity requirements due to the higher EV adoption. The government is also trying to identify locations in rural areas for charging stations so that borders who are doing business in these rural areas can also have charging stations. We are also doing off-grid charging solutions in remote areas using renewable energy sources. And bearing in mind that our country is 93%, whatever we consume in our electric system is 93% is renewable. So again, also we are trying to reach the most farthest end through off-grid solutions. And we have a program in our ministry which are trying to reach the counties that do not have electricity infrastructure through off-grid charging, solutions. We have a project called COSAP, which is trying to reach 14 counties which are underserved, and through mini grids and solar home systems. And we hope by the end of next year we'll be having those counties having off-grid electricity which can be able to provide off-grid charging solutions. We also want to create an efficient regulatory process for charging infrastructure so that we do not have a hitch. So as a ministry, we are trying to create an efficient regulatory process for charging infrastructure establishments. As a government, we would like to incentivize charging infrastructure investment through tax exemptions. We also trying to simplify the permitting process for charging infrastructure installation so that we do not have challenges when we start now implementing, having charging infrastructure being rolled out. So, as investors and the ones who are trying to roll out these e-mobility in our country, you can count on the support of the Minister of Energy as you invest or roll out e-mobility in our country. I look forward to a successful e-mobility week, a successful Africa e-mobility week in our country. So, in this place. So, and I would wish to encourage all of us to be alert, to learn and be able to take home something that can be able to also pass to our colleagues or even use and maybe adopt e-mobility. Thank you and God bless you.
I think Mr. Nzioka deserves a better clap than that. So what I would humbly request, Mr. Nzioka, kindly don't sit. I would humbly request you to come here at the front for our photo moment. Warren, engineer, kindly come forward as well so that we can take a photo. So you'll just get to the stage. Yes, all four. Yes, please, to the stage. Come here at the center. You can smile with your widest teeth. It is acceptable because we are being electrified. So these ones will take your photo. Someone said gender inclusivity. Saruni, do you have that? You're sure? All right. Do you need another one? Or you're good? All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause. There's a media briefing session that will wait for you outside, and the lady called Wangeshi will be the one to assist you. All right. Thank you very much. We're getting next into the details and the intricacies of our forum today. And the next topic we're going to discuss will be in form of a plenary session. We will be able to have an engaging conversation with key experts in this particular forum, people who will be able to engage us and make us understand the conversation and where we're going. So the next plenary session, just give me 1 second. The next plenary session will be Lisa. Thank you. Then the second person I will invite, currently the program manager at CalSTAT, I saw you yesterday, an international organization working to accelerate the global clean transportation energy. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me, Garcia Con. And then finally, a gentleman who's very passionate about electric missions. He's quite instrumental in driving the conversation forward in reference to electric mobility, has been at the forefront of creating key policies when it comes to EV. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Heaton Palmer. So as they are being mic'd, we will be able to have a Q&A session at the end. So the session is supposed to take an average of 40 minutes. Then we will have a 10-minute session whereby the microphone will basically be going round and we'll be able to get more interactive. Enjoy. Warren, over to you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. It's an exciting Africa e-mobility week where countries outside Africa, all over the world, we're happy that electric mobility is becoming a reality every day on the continent. Before I go on, I would also like to invite the government representatives that had already given us so much useful insights on what's happening in Kenya, and this can be a great reflection on what's happening all across in Africa. So I'll call upon Engineer Mushiri, and by a country that's really exciting, and that is Ethiopia. Ethiopia recently banned the importation of fossil fuel vehicles and is only focusing on promoting electric vehicles. So representing the Addis Ababa Electric Mobility Association is Ms. Helena, who I'll call her to come and represent the association. Okay. As you can see, there's already so much momentum that's building on the continent. We have representation from West Africa, from South Africa, from East Africa. And to start this conversation off, the whole idea is to position Africa for global investment using policy. Policy and investments go hand in hand, because without a conducive policy environment, investments will not flow in. To start the conversation, as you introduce yourself, I'll probably throw this to Hiten. Already there's an existing legacy automotive industry on the continent that's manufacturing internal combustion engine vehicles. How is this existing ecosystem of fossil fuel vehicle manufacturing going to transition or receive the electric mobility opportunity that's now currently happening? Hiten, coming from South Africa, where automotive manufacturing is very mature, I think you have some very interesting insights for us on this.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Warren and Jumbo, to everybody, and great to be here back in Kenya, in Nairobi, on this important event as well. As introduced, Hiten Palmer, Executive Director of the Electric Mission in South Africa, a non-profit organization supporting the market development for electric mobility alongside government and industry as a whole. So, as Warren alluded to, South Africa actually celebrates 100 years this year of automotive manufacturing. That started in 1924 with the Ford Model T. That development over the years has secured investments and establishments of plants from 7 multinational automotive manufacturers. That investments and development of that industry has been off the bank of government's enabling policies. Through that 100 years, there's been about 4 different versions of those automotive manufacturing incentives. So it's key that we see government need to create the enabling environment and give the market stimulus. We heard in the introductory comments that government has a key role to have political will and leadership in that. And that's what really drove South Africa's developments of its automotive industry. With that is also the challenge that we see that we are globally faced with in the transition from fossil fuels to electrified vehicles. And with that, South Africa exports 60% of its vehicles to Europe. And with that, we've got the 2035 ban of ICE vehicles that are being closed within that. So South Africa has a dynamic on moving from its legacy automotive manufacturing on ICE to see how do we move into EV manufacturing, because EVs is a big job creation opportunity, but also important within that. So within the government sphere of South Africa itself, they really need to look at their policy incentives on how they're going to position South Africa as a manufacturing environment to attract EV investments and EV component investments versus the existing ICE value chain. So that's the one conundrum. The second conundrum is stimulating local domestic uptake. And this is what we see in terms of the import tariffs that are being applied into electric vehicles versus ICE vehicles. This is a dynamic that we face under a trade agreement with Europe, where internal combustion engine vehicles are part of the lobbying efforts in terms of stimulating the market itself. If I take my South African hat off, I can really, give a point to say that Africa is very opportune, not only from its mineral resources, but opportune for really driving political will and this agenda in attracting investments if we really take e-mobility seriously. So looking forward to the discussions here.
Okay. Yeah, great. It's important that as new entrants in the e-mobility space are looking for the existing infrastructure, that the traditional existing ICE manufacturers should not see this as an immediate threat, but rather as a point of collaboration, because they would have the machinery, they would have the distribution networks, they would have the technical capacity to retool and support this transition to e-mobility. But a question that comes up is, should we be jumping straight to manufacturing? Is there a pathway to start with importation as we build capacity? I'd like to hear from Helena from Ethiopia, a country that has fully embraced electric mobility. How is the adoption rate going like, and is this transition starting from manufacturing or it's starting from more of the importation?
Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot, Warren. So just to give a bit of a highlight, so as most of you are aware, the government has imposed the ban of use of ICE in the market, and you can now significantly see a much larger adoption of electric vehicles in the market. So I was actually surprised while I was driving around Nairobi yesterday. I was not able to see a lot of EVs on the roads, but if you come to Addis these days, at least 1 out of every 10 vehicle, at least in the major city of Addis Ababa, you would see is an EV. So that basically shows you, yes, when there's an imposition or there's a political will, things would slowly change to that. But there's also the fact that the basic infrastructures for such adoption are not in place. So if, I'm sure most of you know, Ethiopia is a developing country where not everybody has the facility to be able to charge their EVs at their homes, or just be able to park even their EVs in a secure area. So two things. So something should have come a little bit before the imposition, which is one of the things should have been just basic education, not only on the use or on the advantage of using EV, but also on the basic utilization, right? So just understanding of how to charge your battery, how to use it for sustaining long life and things like that. Because the fact that now you're forced by the government to use this EV would also, if these 1 or 2 years don't demonstrate a very good experience of using that EV, it will also create a frustration that will lead the government now to change its mind about adopting. So some level of education in terms of how best to use this should be in the market. And of course, there has to be also the infrastructure set, not only by the government, could also be by the private sector, but just, when you set a building requirement or a building standard, then a charging station for an EV should be in place. So just basic things like that should be in place before the imposition, I feel. What we are seeing now is mainly adoption through imports, but we also see there are some interest in terms of manufacturing, which is a very good thing for the country because it also brings a lot of job creation, a lot of local knowledge that we have yet to see being in place. But we know there are conversations with companies like BYD and some private investors wanting to come and set up an assembly plant in Ethiopia. So those are positive things that also come with the imposition.
Yeah, there's definitely a blend of imports versus assembly, because at some point you still need, while in South Africa there's an existing manufacturing capacity that can quickly adopt to this e-mobility. In Ethiopia and many other African countries, manufacturing is only just starting. And so imports are still going to be a primary driver of adoption before capacity is reached, to start putting in the investments into manufacturing capacities and also building the technical expertise that we need on the ground. A couple of other points I'd like to hear is from government on at what pace should government be moving at. From Engineer Mushiri and Engineer Nzioka, Kenya is already pushing to have this draft e-mobility policy, and is pushing the draft mobility policy to come to life and actually position the country as an investment destination. Ethiopia has already jumped ahead and completely banned the sale of ICE vehicles, and so they're ready for EV investments. South Africa is building up its manufacturing capacity very fast. How does Kenya position itself against its peers? How does Kenya and other African countries, in your view, through government, position themselves in a way that not only are governments acting as channels for investment into the country, but also as channels for investment into the region? Because a situation we want to try and avoid as much as possible is the lack of coordination, because if Ethiopia in Eastern Africa is already moving ahead, what does that mean for the rest of the countries? Are they losing investment opportunities? So how is this positioning from government supposed to be in synchrony with some of the regional developments? Engineer.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you. Part of your question is asking what should come first, the egg or the chicken?
Okay.
For example, Ethiopia. Should Ethiopia first have constructed a great network of charging infrastructure before their total ban on those categories of fossil fuel vehicles? Or do you bite the bullet? You know, at the end of the day, when Addis Ababa decided we are banning this, we are stopping this, on that same day, everybody got home, but a little late, a little inconvenienced, but everybody got home. And the following morning in Addis Ababa, people were late for work and all of that. So to upscale electric mobility, there has to be disruption. Remember, the fossil fuel vehicle manufacturers also, they are not quite welcoming electric mobility. It is through the policy documents, such as the one Kenya has prepared, we are trying to bring them on board. The current framework is that the electric mobility company is manufacturing everything themselves. But going ahead, we want the mechanical components to be manufactured by the same companies that were doing the fossil fuel vehicles, probably a little greener, with lighter materials, and somebody else is doing the drivetrain. You know, we are talking of upscaling. We are not talking about one vehicle a week, the capacity we have here. We are saying, instead of you just doing the whole vehicle in your one factory, let the different components be done by different people. And that is what the policy is talking about, that building that synergy by giving each sector its strength. Some companies that are doing EV sales are also doing the financing. But of course, banks can do better in the financing component. So the key word is disruption. We must disrupt the current fossil fuel market through development of policy, regulations, statutes, whatever you call them, and also investing capital in manufacturing. Thank you.
I just want to add my voice on the same, that the draft national e-mobility policy, that the aim is to support local battery manufacturing, recycling, and again also production of, like what you said, EV components, including the charging systems. And we can see some impact when this was done. We have had, it has created a condition that the affordability and the efficiency of the for example, e-motorcycles will make this investment more attractive to, then it also becomes a challenge. And that's the reason why we want to have this conversation where we can now invest in the infrastructure so that we have a lot. We have about 17 car charging stations in Nairobi, not adequate. So we require a lot of them. And I participated in it, developing that National Climate Action Plan, and we identified the uptake of EVs as one of the most important climate actions in the transportations, like what we have done in the National E-Mobility Policy, which supports e-mobility. And we want to promote giving ourselves a target of 30% of all motor vehicles by 2027. So with this target, we are seeing opportunities in terms of investment on the infrastructure, the components, and even the e-vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so already from the government perspective, to me then it looks like, as you've indicated, Engineer Muchiri as well, there's an element of disruption that has to happen for us to challenge because again, being a chicken and egg, someone has to make it by ensuring that there's power availability, and this power is also renewable and as green as possible. Zooming back either on the micro towards transitioning the heavier side.
New green jobs for communities.
4% vehicle stock contributing 35% impact, both energy consumption and CO2 emissions. That's an important category. Mr. Ogumbanjo, what's happening in Nigeria?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
My name is Ademola Ogumbanjo. I'm Executive Vice President, Orlando Clean Energy. side was to literally just build out, starting with the downstream sector right from 1956, spinning that off about 10 years ago, focusing now on trading and exploration and production. So the parent company is still, we have projects across different verticals, whether it's next 5 to 6 years, Africa will spend about $50 billion on PV infrastructure installation. And if present panels, despite all the challenges that will be thrown at us to discourage us from doing so and to just continue to push the agenda that we continue to import onto the continent. But very quickly, let me speak to our approach to sustainable transport. We split that in two. Sustainable transport is electric vehicles for municipal transportation and hydrogen-fueled or biofueled vehicles for long haul. Speaking to the heavy-duty trucks and all of that do long haul services. What we wanted to do, to Michael's point earlier about, chicken or egg, which one comes first? What we wanted to do was build that charging infrastructure. But you don't do that hoping that someday people will begin to adopt the use of electric vehicles, haven't spent billions, because you're not only building the charging infrastructure, there are the chargers, there are the armored cables that cost a lot, by the way, and then there's the power that needs to go into the chargers. Let's recognize a number of African nations cannot support the proliferation or widespread adoption jump in the adoption of electric vehicles. So it's got to be modularized, it's got to be phased. Or do you wait for the adoption to begin and then you start to build out the infrastructure? Again, nobody will bring in an electric vehicle into any environment through the Metropolitan Transport Authority called LAMATA. And thinking and conversation around the adoption of electric vehicles, the energy transition, any thought to do was, let's create demand for the infrastructure that we will build. So working with the state government, we brought in 2 buses, 12-meter buses from Yutong in China, just to basically test the technology. Does the technology work? The operations as well, environmental acceptance, as well as commercial viability. We've done that for over a year now. It's clear that the technology works. We've ordered additional 50 buses, same capacity, just to expand the routes and the fleet. And then by first quarter of 2025, we'll add another 500. In Lagos alone, we're doing 2,000 buses by 2027, and in Nigeria, we're doing 12,000 buses by 2030. But recognize what we're building here is actually not a transport company. What we're building is a downstream company for e-mobility. What those buses are doing is just to create a market for the infrastructure for charging that we're building. And we recognize very quickly that when it comes a day, because again, to the lady's point earlier, longevity when it comes to battery lifespan, because of the technology of how batteries are designed, it's in cycles. So if you charge too often, you reduce somewhat the lifespan of the batteries. So we have buses that do 280 kilometers on a full charge, but with the regeneration technology, of the braking system that sends charge back to the batteries, we found that to be at about 34%, which takes the capacity really to about 350 kilometers on a full charge. And when you look at efficiency, the diesel engine counterpart of these buses will consume about 0.56 liters of diesel per kilometer. The electric buses have done an average of 0.89 kilowatt hour per kilometer. In Nigeria, a liter of diesel is about 1,600 naira. A kilowatt hour is about 78 naira. The difference is clear. So this is the agenda that we're pushing. Just basically showing the world, in the context of Nigeria, that electric vehicle deployment for transportation can work. And when people see that these vehicles work for public transportation, then they have the confidence to buy even for personal use. But that said, what we're developing here is an ecosystem. So there's need for capacity development to be able to provide maintenance services for the vehicles. There's need for a brand new supply chain system that will supply parts for repairs when required. There's need for training drivers to be able to drive the electric vehicles, because you don't drive ICE the same way you drive electric vehicles. When we rolled out the 2 buses, we trained 21 drivers. These are drivers of commercial buses in Lagos. Currently, we trained 21 of them, only 7 passed to be able to drive the electric buses. So that's essential as well to be done. And then, of course, there has to be local assembly. You were speaking earlier about manufacturing on the continent. Manufacturing has not begun on the continent. What's happening on the continent is assembly. Because the local market on the continent is not, the supply chain system is not mature enough to create manufacturing. And no matter how much we slice and dice this, if African nations do not trade closely together, we will continue to import from the rest of the world. When Michael spoke earlier about the standards, you know, your point around if standards are not well regulated, it may stifle innovation. And you're absolutely correct. But the bottom line is the baseline is standards, and it's got to be a universal framework for standards that Africa will adopt. You spoke earlier about adopting CCS2, but the bottom line is the bulk of the electric vehicles that will come onto the continent will come from China. So what happens to GBT? So we'll continue to borrow standards because we haven't created a manufacturing hub that's mature for ourselves. But if we're going to work together as a continent, if I'm going to be able to import vehicles from Ethiopia, import vehicles from Kenya, even though you're right hand, I'm left hand, you know, the bottom line is we need to cooperate as African nations, developing within the ecosystem of energy transition as a whole, not just electric vehicles, right? Developing along the lines of our natural resources and expertise. For those of us who took economics back at college, one of the first things they will teach you is a comparative advantage. We learn these things, but we don't put them to practice. If African nations come together, we can manufacture our own electric vehicles and set our own standards and begin to sell energy across the continent, even if it's regional based. But there's policy that must be coherent and consistent. There must be standards that need to be universal for us on the continent, or else you find Kenya borrowing standards from India, but India borrowed it from Europe. And then you find Ethiopia borrowing standards from the United Kingdom, you know, and then you find Nigeria borrowing standards from China, and you have a diversified, incoherent e-mobility market on the continent. We've done this with fossil, where we export literally all our crude and import refined petroleum. We're about to also transition this continent into poverty if we do not retain the value that energy transition will create on the continent. So we must create manufacturing hubs on the continent. East Africa can manufacture solar panels, West Africa can manufacture electric vehicles, and what have you, wind vanes, whatever it is. The bottom line is we have to work together. What is happening in Nigeria cannot lift Africa out of this confusion around the curation of our transition. We're taking too many instructions from Europe, and the reason is because we haven't even created a uniform plan. There's a Euro plan that's being pushed by the EU. Where's the African plan that's being pushed by the AU? It's fragmented, and we will struggle if we continue to do it this way. The scale we're looking for, we won't find it, because the funding doesn't even, you know, exist on this continent. So it's that cohesion, that collective nature of the rollout that's required, you know, to scale, that will attract foreign investors. And then, of course, you see them complaining about, you know, the source of energy for powering the chargers.
Sure.
Right? They tell you, you know, so for Nigeria, for example, 75% of Nigeria's energy from the grid is fossil gas. And then the DFIs are struggling to fund charging infrastructure because of that. With the power infrastructure that they're asking for is Africa's standards, and then working together, collectively. Let's see the AU actually, get up and do something.
Yeah, the ball is really in the court of the African collaboration. We have 5 minutes. We have a very interesting conversation going on here. I think I'll only allow maybe 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll receive some of the final remark for the continent. But then how does Africa move in harmony with some of the global developments? We don't want to be caught second again, importing used vehicles or used technologies for a continent that has the chance right now to build its own capacity. So we'll take 2 questions. Okay. So we can take 2 questions from the audience. I saw the gentleman in the specs and the lady at the back. Is there a microphone here? Okay, we can start with ladies, then we can go with you. The ladies with the pink jacket, we could ask her. So you can state your name and who you're addressing the question to. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Chiamaka Enendu. I am a business journalist with Trust Television Nigeria. My question is directed at Mr. Demola Ogumbanjo. You've spoken extensively regarding, collaborations and, regional integration between all African nations. But I'd like for you to, emphasize more on the low-hanging fruit areas that you would want to see collaborations happen in, especially around, setting standards like you've spoken about. What specific areas would you want to see these standards being set and these collaborations being had amongst African nations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yamaka. Very quickly, let me speak to a potential collaboration. The Global North is beginning to sing a new song about improving the supply chain relationship between Europe and Africa. But when you look at the essence of this new song, it still speaks to Africa supplying critical minerals to Europe, and then the refined or processed product then comes back to Africa. Between Congo and Nigeria, nickel, cobalt, lithium, we can manufacture batteries on the continent. Batteries will play a major role in battery. Right? It's the vehicle for storing energy into the bought by Nigeria, and everybody was excited. But that's just processing plant. The processed lithium will still go out of Nigeria and for our vehicles, whether it's 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, or 4-wheelers, or large trucks, advantage of even the things or the value that can be created within ourselves. To have Kenya and its GBT in Ethiopia, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's an example of collaboration. We have the solid minerals. The technology exists. The machines are there. Yes, what is called, another word for expertise is human capital. They can be bought. Yeah. Bring them onto the continent to teach us what we do not know. Exide batteries were being manufactured in Nigeria many years ago. Yeah. Now that battery has become a whole lot bigger than it used to be. China and Nigeria is doing the same to China, and then China manufactures batteries and send back to Africa. Okay. We're not that backward. We should actually just tell ourselves we're not that backward. We just need to get our acts together, and somebody in the AU needs to literally pinch them and tell them, wake up and do something. Exactly. And I hope that answers your question.
I hope that answers your question for sure. Thanks, Mr. Demola. So I knew we had one here from this gentleman. I can see a microphone around me. Here. Rayo Changamka. So you would just mention your name and who you're addressing it to.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Moteri. I work for the International Committee of the Red Cross. We are one of the early adopters in the humanitarian world that have taken the EVs on board in our fleet. My question is to the engineer for Ministry of Transport and Roads. How soon can we get the EV policy published so that we can be able to see exactly what are the incentives or what are the policy guidelines for us to be able to enhance our mobility in terms of adopting more electric vehicles.
1 second, sir. Engineer, can you hear? No. I would request if you could put your microphone quite close to you.
Okay.
Because I think he didn't grasp it. So just start again.
My question is, how soon can we get the EV policy out so that we can be able to see exactly what are the deliberations and the guidelines that have been provided for us to be able to make decisions, considering that we work in a regional context. You know, Kenya is a regional hub for the International Committee of the Red Cross, so we prepare vehicles here for the region. And because Kenya is an early adopter, we want to spread the same to the other regions where we operate. The second question will be, I think, if I'm not wrong, some time back we saw a minister saying that the green license plates will be used for the electric vehicles, and I know currently they're being assigned to the Kenya garage. Is there any change in terms of in that arrangement? And the third and last question.
1 second, sir. Let's take it a step at a time. Let me give you two first. Okay. Engineer, did you capture both questions?
Yes.
Would you like the first one to be taken by Engineer Muchiri and then the other one by Mr. Nzioka?
Well,
that's
I mean,
okay.
Right. They can both answer. But I can just to conclude is that in terms of policy, do we have any indications whether you've consulted the other East African communities so that we are able to make decisions when we are importing these vehicles for us to be able to harmonize the standard?
Okay.
Yeah.
I would request to start with the first two. Thank you for your questions. So we can start with engineer, and then we can go to Mr. Nzioka.
Thank you for your very many questions. But we'll try and see how to work around them. Now, the draft electric mobility policy is available. So if you go to the transport website, you'll be able to get a draft. If not, see me after this, we'll organize one for you. But the way things work in Kenya, when you prepare a draft as experts, then it has to be presented to the parliament. So parliament is the final adapter of the policy. From the draft, you package it in a parliamentary language, and it is then called a sessional paper. So we are right now at the steps towards getting some experts to package it to a sessional paper for presentation to parliament for formal adoption. But I want us to separate documents from action. And basic colleague here and the lady there, they are annoyed we are not moving fast enough. So policy documents are good, but if there is no action post the policy document, then of what use was it? And the way, again, the industry works, with or without a policy document, there are entrepreneurs out there who move even faster than policy documents. Electric vehicles were imported into Kenya and to many of our countries before the policy papers came out. Okay? So, but the policy papers are important. Closely related to your third question, how are we working as Africa? In Africa, we have the Africa Region Standard Organization. And that standard organization, from the AU perspective, is informed by the regional bodies. In East Africa, we have the East African Community. South of us, we have COMESA. South of COMESA, we have SADC. West of Africa, we have ECOWAS. Horn of Africa, we have IGAD. North of Africa, we have a Maghreb Regional Economic Commission. So from the AU perspective, through the Africa Region Standard Organization, that debate should be in the next summit. Targeting electric mobility. He was saying, Nigeria alone or Kenya alone, we can only do so much. For us to create sufficient demand for heavy capital investment in manufacturing, it can only be done when all these regional organizations are talking the same language, promoting electric mobility in the same direction. So that is the debate we need to have. And on your last question, on the question of number plates, it's not about the color. Having a green number plate is good, but so what? It was about only number plates that are green, whether it will be actually green or orange in color. Number plate, whether it is green or orange or yellow color, that will be allowed certain parts of the city.
Lovely photographers. Saruni, I can't see you. Oh, there you are. So you'll just come forth. As I say, smile away. Now for gender balance engineer, will you allow me to tell this lovely lady to come in the middle? Thank you. So smile at the cameras. Don't be too serious. All right, let's give them one last round of applause as they come down. We fully appreciate you. So for our panelists, there are a couple of media guys waiting for me outside. So engineer, GIZ, Kun Nagel, the representatives, we humbly request if you could be outside so that we can take some of your pointers. We've come at that moment whereby it is time to feed ourselves and enjoy some snacks that were prepared. So it is, you will give out your tea break tea card to the security man. Wanjiko, I hope we are good. Yvonne, yes. I will see you, if you'll be here at 12:10, I will be greatly appreciated. Enjoy yourselves and I will see you then.
that regard. So we are happy to support Kenya in that regard, Cape Verde as well.
Importing goods and people, and when it comes to the buses, I mean, in a country like Kenya, I would say maybe more than half of all the fuels work exactly on these topics. Also here in Kenya, and who come with quite significant budgets. Very good to hear this. Next question. From what I understand, P4G is very much focusing on private sector, yeah? To get small, medium enterprises e-mobility ready. So, with what sort of partners are you working with? What are the partnerships you're involving? Yeah? And secondly, how do you this with private sector funding? How are you doing this?
Thank you. Yes, maybe just to give a little background on the same. P4G stands for Partnerships for Green Growth and Global Goals. It was an initiative set up in 2018. We're working in 6 countries in the south. Seeks to support climate startups, early stage, to transition to commercialization and investability. The ambition being to scale. And in it, we are working in more than, in 3 key sectors. And mobility is but one of the areas that we are kind of for-profit partner. The folk address the systemic issues around the business. Often it's a business model issue, or sometimes it's a policy. The whole question of how do you raise part of what then the P4G facility funds. Now essentially, and I think a lot of the partners, I guess most of the e-mobility partners in Kenya, we've supported one way or another, addressing even commercial issues that need to be addressed to enable that that is addressed before an investor can come in to support. We've been funding. I think Kenya has received most of the funding at the early stages. We're now in phase 2, and we are now trying to see how do you scale this up. We've used probably most of the business use case for e-mobility in terms of funding partnerships. We are now, I think maybe it's only the private passenger vehicles that have not been addressed essentially in the...
Now, turning to Christian. So he's the director of German Agora Verkehrswende, a Berlin-based think tank supporting the transition to zero-emission mobility. So I do understand financing is, of course, all this money needed to get those companies started. Apart from the financing, what do you think?
Okay. Normally, we Germans don't have so much problems with technology. Congratulations to this interesting, inspiring Africa e-mobility. Over the years, we saw, especially before the COP in Glasgow, that many countries, emerging economies also, signed up for the net zero pledges, saying that we also have the target to decarbonize our society and our economy by mid-century. So this, brings us very close together because we have the same task. And I think what is important to always remember that if we talk about these financing issues and that this is related to so much cost, this transformation of the sector, and to make this work, there's no time where it is as cheap as today to do this. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, it will be more and more costly because the damage and the losses from climate change will add so much cost that it's every time cheaper to invest in climate protection and also in decarbonizing the transport sector. And if it comes to the question, what is the technology which will guide us in a decarbonized sector? Not only technology will do this, but without electric mobility in the road transport sector, it will be impossible to decarbonize the transport sector by 2050, by mid-century. And this is now the question, how can we accelerate this? And this can only be done from our perspective by international cooperation and by a different meaning of international cooperation. It's not that it's a kind of development aid where the former industrialized countries will spend money for emerging economies to, catch up. It is looking jointly for solution. It's a joint investment. We are not investing in Germany in the decarbonization, and you in Kenya. We invest both in global decarbonization and totally, structural change of the sector, which is huge. And in Germany, it is very, painful, because we have to get rid of our very successful industry with combustion engines running on fossil fuels for 130 years. We invented the car, so to say, and now we have to realize that this car will not survive in the future. It's a dinosaur with regard to technology, and has to come to an end, and it will die. And this is not easy for a lot of people in Germany to accept that this will be the case. But it is the case, and that would mean that we will totally restructure the industries and the supply chains, and a continent like Africa and countries in Africa have the huge chance not to have this painful chances and opportunities related to this new world of e-mobility, which will guide you. What else is needed than financing? And I say again, please remember, it will never as cheap as today to do this transformation. Then it's only, in brackets, only political will and the cooperation between stakeholders. Why? It needs political will. Otherwise, it's a political market. It will not develop on its own. So you will not do this transformation as a business-driven innovation. It's politically driven, and you have to have an idea how to, accelerate the market, and the market will only be accelerated if you think from the target. And the target will be a world where all the vehicles running on the roads are electrified. And then you look back, and there you need all the people on board, the policymakers, the business sector, the civil society organizations, and the science or the academia sector, and jointly co-create a world where this takes place. This is the only way forward, because you need this cooperation. We did already many mistakes in the past, in the last 20 years, with developing e-mobility, because we thought it's a change of technology. We saw this in the energy transition. It's a change from fossil fuels to an world where you have a successful industry, that end. The only way to accelerate and scale, the change to electric mobility is by open markets, by international cooperation, and jointly renewing the... I was a little bit puzzled hearing that Europe is just trying to get... If this would change everything to electric mobility. So this international cooperation, joint learning, examples on it, but this is the only way forward. Cooperation between the stakeholders and competition between the companies, and not the other way.
You developed a lot of very interesting thoughts. I will come back to two of them. I mean, first of all, with this, come to good outcomes when it comes to negotiations. I think that is very important. And the second thing is the political will. And I think it's very interesting to see, so also, me as working for UNEP, traveling quite a bit around because also we have a lot of African e-mobility projects. Climate change sometimes, very adamant in also emphasizing these economic considerations. Many of the African countries are net importers of fuels, and indeed that idea of using locally
since last year, and we are announcing 2 more this week. Every country again, but really see, okay, what is certain similar
platform on just transitions, and the just transitions in various sectors. So the ambition is also now
to copy these projects. Yes, I will stop
Very good.
there. Thank you.
I mean, talking about ambition, next year is the next round of determined contributions. That is a very good place to formulate ambition.
We will learn from the project in Zimbabwe that ability as well as just ergonomics. I think that's something that has to be promoted in all of these discussions. It's not fuel from a car. It has all these other issues around what you could do.
Okay. I have room for one more question. Yes, sir. Is it easier to get him a microphone from that side? Okay.
To put on to these types of vehicles. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we move on to a discussion regarding what we do, an in-depth part. So we have a PPT, a presentation about this one. Oh, thank you. Okay. So this is an overview of Chagori Technologies and its roles in electric mobility. So we're going to talk about not all the connection systems, because connections is something that you don't see. It's inside the vehicle. And also for us, we are in the lower part, it's not going to work. So we're going to talk about connections, only 2. We're talking about the charging connector and the battery connector. So this is a charging connector where, like for example, you have the phone, you have a cable, you charge it. The same thing. But of course, it's tailor-made for the vehicle. So one thing that is important to be using in electric vehicle is that this needs to be robust enough to work outdoors. Okay? And then it's not just about robustness. It needs to work properly in terms of electrical requirements of the vehicle and even the mechanical requirements. Of course, when we're using this kind of connectors, user experience is very important as well. Okay, so an example is a charging connector. You see on the left is the charging port. The one on the right is the charging cable. So having these 2 parts is essential for a vehicle to be charged and be used every day. So mostly, you go and bring your battery or your vehicle at home and you charge it. And this needs to be done like once or twice a day. So using this motion, once or a proper strain relief so that this can work is not going to break. And also, since these are carrying power, you need to have something like an anti-finger access, so that you not get shocked once you're handling the connector. In the usage, it's not going to break. Okay, so here we have some bending of the cable, making sure that it's not going to break in the lifetime. Mating cycles, like I was telling you earlier, mating connector that I was telling you, African market, where the battery rated on the battery, and again, okay, it's rating that the power of the motor draws from the battery is not enough, and it heats up. So these are some common issues that we experience. So we need to check on how different people handle these batteries, such as these kinds of scenarios, okay? So we need to test them properly. So battery capacity, so we cannot use just any type of connector, right? Okay, another one is, I think this is a BMW CE, becoming more and more famous, not just here, all around Southeast Asia. So that is where we provide our services to give a good connection technology to meet the demands and requirements of the customers. Okay, more examples here, connectors. Of course, in different current discharger connector in the vehicle, mostly those are slow chargers. The higher current ones are used in infrastructures where it will feature more details from us. You can talk to us directly. And collaboration with, we go to question and answers. Question and answer portion, guys.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what are the steps that are being taken now to have interoperability for battery swapping in Kenya and in Africa generally.
Yeah, interoperability for swapping. So currently, like what I was showing earlier, we have different types of battery. Okay, this is just an example. It's not, everything is in Kenya, but the interoperability right now is a little bit difficult because of the wide range of vehicle models and capabilities. This is something that we need to address for sure in the future, but interoperability is kind of still in the early stages now because battery is a little bit sensitive. As you know, we also need to take care of these heating up. And we see in the news that they're also burning up in the streets, right? So interoperability is still in the early stages that we need to take care a lot of. So right now, I do suggest that this needs to be taken into good consideration where the proper charging power needs to be used in the proper vehicle itself. Yes, please, Kelvin.
Yep, let me just very quickly answer the question as well in terms of we're getting a lot of these questions globally. My name is Kelvin. I'm also one of the senior leaders of the company. There's a lot of history built up over the years in which we embarked on this market as far back as about 8-9 years ago. So we were quite fortunate to have the very first generation of products, the one, you go to the product slide. The one that is on the product slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Later part. So we started with that range of connectors, which is at the bottom right side. We managed to get ourselves into Bosch footprint. That was when things sort of started with regards to two-wheelers. Then from there, many things start to evolve. Different markets have different requirements. Even until today, people are asking us, are there actually a standard? It's been talked about for the last 3 to 4 years, and until now, it still remains an open topic based on what they may be required to do. So as we evolve, we learn. So we ended up with different product ranges that went up to slightly higher power, and some of them are used in scooters, some of them are used in motorcycles, things like that. So yesterday I had a chance to went on this day tour, and then there was one of the operators that is more in the four-wheeler side. So the four-wheeler side, they are using type 1 of the current the corresponding voltage step up the current to about 180 ampere. So, and we're thinking about how to break through from a technical perspective. So this is as real as the current situations. We are represented in China. We have a lot of markets in India, in Southeast Asia, currently in Africa. So we just do whatever we can. And then if there is a very significant drive by certain governments for support. Okay? Hopefully it answers the question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin.
There's a gentleman here in blue. Somebody else?
One is, do you provide any adapters so that we can think about connectors? It's important, but batteries are using protocols and we need each other. So I know maybe it's not your area of expertise, but what's your take on that as well?
Yeah. So first thing is about it's similar to interoperability. It's regarding a use of an adapter, which I already saw in a couple of our meetings a few days ago. So adapters, that connector, for example, this is something that can be done, yeah. Of course, it's not a standard one. When you're talking about, like, for example, ESC-T6, it's a standard connector. We need to follow a certain, even the design of the interface needs to follow that standard. So having to use a adapter to be able to bridge these two different standards, it can work, but we need to be careful how we use them. That makes sure that the interoperating burn out. So your next question, these connectors, right? And help you guys and go to discuss with different types of government, different types of companies. Of course, we need to think it's also going to be easier for us to develop a certain same connector that caters to everyone. This is, I think, is the end game, which is going to benefit everybody. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give David a round of applause. I would ask you not to leave, if it's okay, Dominic, so that Warren can step up and take a photo, if that's okay. Yes. Warren,
maybe Kelvin?
Could you kindly take a photo? Yes. As we are doing that, I have a parking card that is missing. If you know that you're the owner of KCU 5. All right. Thank you very much. Let's appreciate Chogori being a major sponsor for this event. We're fully grateful.
Thank you.
On to my next guest. The gentleman that I'm going to introduce comes from an organization. Yes. He will be able to be sharing insight on the extensive work in reference to e-mobility, transport, and decarbonization projects across sub-Saharan Africa. This gentleman has been able to be present in multiple projects that focus on the feasibility and implementation of e-mobility for both public and private clients, as well as key financial institutions such as World Bank, GIZ, and KfW. He has a team who has been able to work closely with government policy makers, startups, transport operators, other stakeholders in order to identify the challenges that are hindering e-mobility growth. He's been able to work with various sectors such as the two-wheelers, public buses, taxis, and trucking. CPCS has been able to develop policy and financing solutions to help address these barriers and increase the deployment of e-mobility. Today, he will discuss valuable lessons learned from this project and how basically they are applying to similar initiatives across Africa and vast regions. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly help me welcome Mr. Andrew Beauford.
Thank you so much. Oh, perfect. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew. Nice to see you all. I've come here from Canada, And although it's still a little bit warm in Canada, it's getting to fall, so it's chilly. So I'm enjoying this beautiful weather in Nairobi. Thank you for welcoming me to your lovely city. I do have a presentation that's coming up. There we go, perfect. So as mentioned, I'm from CPCS. I will make one correction. CPCS actually stands for Canadian Pacific Consulting Services. It is a common mistake, but that's what our acronym stands for. So we're a consulting company, and it's quite interesting to have that conversation from our colleague at Chogori previous to me, just showing the diversity of people that we have here today. So it's way before that we get to the point where, as well, we worked on the Senegal BRT project, which is, so through our work, we have consulted the entire industry in Africa. So as consultants, one of our jobs is to go get information, and we do that by speaking to people like yourselves. But that has included, for example, 50 e-mobility startups in Africa, working with governments in over 20 countries in Africa, as well as looking at fund managers. So who's actually providing financial banks that are also playing a big role in the development of the sector in Africa. Forces some of our findings. And really, in speaking to all those stakeholders, we've identified a number of barriers. And so from the financial and economic side, obviously the access to finance, we've heard that a number of times today on our industry tour yesterday, speaking to different companies. Hearing about the cost of finance is quite giving some good awareness about how challenging it is here in Africa. Fiscal policy, so governments, environmental benefits. We heard also about maintenance requirements. So electric vehicles are a new type of infrastructure. It requires technical expertise that is sometimes absent in Africa and really all new markets. And also knowledge and capacity barriers. So we heard about how governments, private sector, and even the public at large sometimes do not have the knowledge of the EV benefits. They may also planning, so making sure that energy sector is generated vehicles, and then e-mobility policies. We heard about the e-mobility policy this morning being developed in Kenya and other markets in Africa. And this can really have a big impact on the development of the sector, and the government is demonstrating commitment to the sector e-mobility in doing so. So maybe something we haven't heard as much today. So different types of guarantees, including guarantees that are given to local banks to enable local currency lending, as well as governments providing guarantees to support projects, and then of course coming from concessional sources, MDBs providing guarantees to help bring in private investment or de-risk projects as well. And finally, maybe the one I'll talk about is grants as well. We've heard there's a high need for this. Especially in Africa and markets where the e-mobility industry's perceived risks about a company not being profitable yet, and the investment is still quite sizable because, so we would like to see that happen and to help our private sector and government clients to increase the impact there. And so lastly, I just wanted to touch briefly on where we see the different venture capital and funds on the spectrum in terms of supporting e-mobility. Climate-themed funds or sustainable-focused funds clearly have a strong overlap with green mobility. They might not specifically be a focus on e-mobility, but anything that has a positive climate impact could be eligible for climate-themed funds. And then moving to the right Venn diagram, we see energy-themed funds having a strong overlap with electric mobility, as there's a direct relation between e-mobility and energy infrastructure and impact. And also looking at infrastructure-themed funds as well, which can be such as InfraCo Africa, for example, which also support e-mobility. And finally, technology-themed funds. So if there's an e-mobility company that has more of a technology focus, that's something that could be targeted as well. And through our work, we've consulted with 15, 20 of these types of funds to get to know what their priorities are, what they want to invest in, and we've helped our clients to sort of match investors with the needs and the direction of their projects. So that's it. I'd like to thank you for your attention. It's been really exciting to get to know people this week. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, please come talk to me or one of my colleagues. And you can take a picture of that QR code to learn more about us. And I think we'll have a short Q&A if there's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Standing over here.
Hi, thank you.
I had a question on the equity need. What do you make of the challenges over the past, let's say, 10 years in equity investments, where there are obviously challenges with making exits, too high valuations, and so on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's certainly a challenge, and that's why I think we've seen in our consultations why there's been more difficulty in companies these days accessing equity. It's, as I said, one of the highest needs that we've heard, but where there's a huge gap as well. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think we're still understanding it ourselves a little bit. And it would be interesting to also understand how concessional finance or blended finance structures could also be used to help de-risk. We've also worked on projects looking at the establishment or the feasibility of establishing regional funds that would involve DFIs or concessional finance sources that would absorb first losses. You know, I'm not sure if these addresses your question directly, but these are a few things that we've looked at. But I'd love to chat more, actually, if that would be great.
Yeah, let's do so. I'm with XSML Capital, by the way. We finance the missing middle, so curious to catch up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Is there another question in the audience? Somebody else? Okay. So maybe, Warren, I would invite you to take a photo with Andrew so that we can break out for lunch, if that's okay. Saruni? Oh, you're here. Let's give him one last round of applause, please.
Maybe for our picture, I'll just put this one on. Ladies in the middle. Okay, let's go in the middle, I think.
Pardon me.
Right, awesome.
Okay,
Thank you,
let's give them one last round of applause and appreciate them. Thank you very, very much. So immediately after this, we are going to break out for lunch. That's the part your smiles can be a bit wider. Thank you. So we're going to break out for lunch, and you will just come back for 2 minutes or 2 to 5 minutes, whereby I will explain you, but humbly requesting if you could understand. So when you come back, I will explain quickly the different breakout rooms, and then there will be a networking session powered